welcome back. Today I'm going to talk to you about the different kinds of chips that you can find on a motherboard and a couple soldering tips. Okay, let's go to the microscope. We're taking a look right here at, well, this is a MOSFET. Okay, this kind of chip where you can see the prongs or the legs sticking out, the connectors, we call those QFN type chip, just like this one over here. And with these kind of chips, well, you can easily take them on and off, as I have demonstrated. So I'm going to do that here real quick, trying not to disturb my... Yeah, the wife's asleep. I don't want to wake her up with dropping beer cans. Speaking of beer cans, so I'm going to get my hot air up to, well, I pretty much run it on max. The only thing I really change on my hot air, honestly, is the airspeed. So I'm going to max out the airspeed on this. Let's let that get up to 500 degrees Celsius, and I'm going to grab my tweezers and get ready and show you how you take this off and put it back on. Then I'm going to show you the difference between that kind of chip and BGA. But right now you don't need to know what BGA stands for. Okay, so I'm going in, and remember the entire board has to heat up because there's solder underneath the chip. There's solder in the middle there. So the whole board has got to heat up. So I come in from a little bit of a distance, and I'll start heating up in the area, and then when I'm ready, I'll hone in on the actual chip, getting closer. And you don't want to burn up your board, you don't want to burn up your chip. And you see, because I preheated the board, that chip came off pretty easily. Now, you can see that I can just put this chip right back on. I could add solder, and most likely I'm going to. I could clean up the area. Some people do both. They'll clean up the solder. Here, let me keep my marriage. Set these down here. All right, so we know how to clean this up. What do we need? We need flux. And so I'm going to add some flux here. A little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some leaded solder, and what that does is that softens up the non-leaded solder that's on the board. So I'll just go ahead and tin my, you don't have to put too much on there, and remember your tip can only hold so much. So it doesn't matter that you're using the thick stuff. And this bridging right here, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be wicking that off anyway. Okay? All right. So I'm going to add a little bit more flux. You don't have to clean after everything. Just add a little more flux. The area is still nice and warm. And I'll grab my solder wick. I need to cut a piece off of that. You can either use scissors, or I use an X-Acto knife because my wife stole my scissors. I think that's the second time I've mentioned that in these videos. And yet she probably has 3 pairs of scissors and I have none. So I'll wick that off. And these kind of chips are called QFN. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what the QFN stands for, but as I go here to wick it off, these are the easy chips. Now you see how that solder just flowed right up that wick? The key is flux and heat. And so you clean it off, and what that's for is to get rid of the higher melting, more brittle solder that the factory put on, and have one good leaded solder on there because it's more malleable. You can take them on and off easier to work with in general. So I'm going to clean up this area using alcohol. And remember, I use the, where are they? Oh, here they are. I use the lint-free sheets. A lot of people do use the cotton swabs, and I do have lint-free swabs, but they're just so tiny. And some people use this method with a brush. I don't know why, but that cleans up real good. So that is cleaned. And now what I'll do is, you guessed it, I'm going to add some more flux to this area, because flux helps solder go where you want it to go. I'm going to grab my soldering iron, tin it, and just tin these. This is called drag soldering, where I'm just dragging the soldering iron across. Okay, and you see, because I have flux, I have no bridges. All right, now I'm going to leave that flux there, and I'm going to take my chip that I took off. I'm going to use the hot air again. If I could find my chip that I just took off. There we go. Where'd you go? Did it blow off? Did I blow it off? Where's that chip? Oh, there it is. I found you. Okay, got my chip near the area, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to lift the chip up, and I'm going to preheat that solder, start getting it soft. I'm going to set my chip down. Okay, now the chip is held down. Now I'm going to move it a little bit more into position. Hang on a second, I've got the air up too high. I'm blowing it around. And that's that. That's how you remove and then replace a QFN chip. That's easy. Okay? Now I'm going to introduce you to something hard. All right, BGA chips. Examples of BGA chips on this board, like here, this is a 1 gigabyte of RAM, and it is a BGA chip. I removed one over here to show you what it looks like. Look how many little connections it has. And what it has is little balls on the bottom of this chip. The chips come pre-balled. Unless you remove a chip, then you're going to have to ball it yourself. And then you have to clean this up. This is nice and smooth, just like I cleaned up the QFN one, to put another BGA chip on there. But if you're repairing a chip, let's say this chip, I found a short on it, and the short isn't showing through the thermal camera, but I know that there's a short there. It could be the solder balls under there touching. It's got too hot and the solder balls have moved. Well, then you're going to have to reball it once you take it off. And I'll show you what a BGA chip looks like. Where's my, here we go. So here's what the actual chip looks like. If you take a look at that, that's a whole lot of work by hand. There are some people that will do that by hand. Personally, that's a little bit too much for by hand right now for me. But some people do that by hand. The first thing you got to do is you've got to clean up this chip just like you do the area that it came from. And the best thing for you to have is a chip holder. I don't currently own a chip holder. So this is going to move around on us a little bit, and I'm going to come in a little bit closer with my microscope. Let's get it over here so we can see a little bit better. Maybe even down a little further. Let's go. Here we go. You're going to need to be able to see when you're doing this, okay? Now, a lot of people have got little holders for these, and you remove the solder the exact same way that you do off of a board. The first thing you do is you add some flux. And I'm not going to do this whole chip. You add a little flux. Okay. And then you grab your soldering iron and add a little bit of leaded solder to it. So I'm going to tin my iron. Going to put a little bit more on it than I did earlier. And I'm going to move this around, and I'm essentially, well, see that capacitor that just went bye-bye? I'm going to have to put that back on. Okay, and what I'm doing is I'm adding leaded solder to each one of these balls. Non-leaded solder balls. And this thing is hot to touch. Let me move this back over here. Okay. Now, when you do remove a BGA chip, there are ways that you can figure out whether it's a chip or it's solder balls. And the way you figure that out is by having the schematic. Okay, now I'm going to take my copper wick, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the QFN chip, the board. You just wick off the solder balls. Now, I am not going to do this whole chip, like I said before. And when I was talking about having a schematic, you could figure out a schematic of the chip and find out if the chip is bad by seeing where ground is and where it's not, and where two pins should not be touching. And you can do that even with the solder on, okay? So this chip is now ready for solder balls, just about. And guys, here, the key here is flux. You gotta have flux. And if you're gonna do a lot of these, I suggest, and eventually I will probably have a holder, okay? There's our chip here, it's clean. Now you can see some spots that are different colors. What are those? Are spots where the pad pulled up. A lot of times where pads pull up, they're very easily taken off, is because there are no connects. And you can confirm that on the schematic. Now, this kind of chip with this many connections, and this is actually a very moderate BGA chip. There's more than 100 connections here. We can't make QFN chips with as many connections as BGA chips, and these are what make modern technology possible. They are a pain in the rear to deal with, okay? So we've determined, let's pretend we've determined that this chip is okay. What we would do is we would then, after we have it cleaned off, we would get either a stencil, or you could do this by hand, which right now I would have to do a chip by hand, and I personally would not do this size one by hand right now for the camera, because it'd take too long. This would take me about an hour to do, and I'm not going to make my video that long. And you can, with that stencil, you can either go by hand or use a stencil, which really helps, or you can do it by hand using solder balls. And what this is here is, this is a cap, or this is 25, about to show you here, that's 25,000 tiny little solder balls, and I've got 3 different sizes. Okay, and you can use solder balls with a stencil, or what some people use with the stencil is solder paste. I really don't like solder paste. I just don't. And it comes in 3 different sizes. I've got a couple other sizes here. But the way that you go about that is, you have flux, a little light coating of flux on here, like is currently on there, and then you will dump, carefully dump, and I'm going to try to do this as carefully as I can. I'm just going to spill out a few balls. Okay, you see that? Balls falling. So I've got a few solder balls down here. Okay, and what you do if you're doing this by hand is, and I've got one here on my tweezer, is you move them into the places where they're supposed to go, and those are those pads. Looks like those are stuck together, okay? And you move them over onto the pad. Okay, there's one. And guys, this takes practice. There's 2 and 3, 2, and see, I've got 4. But you get the picture. These are hard to do, and they can take a while. And the ones that are showing copper, well, you're not going to get a solder ball on those. Those pads are gone. Okay, so I really didn't dump out as many as I should have. So I'm going to just clean off my, here we go, got a few more dumped on there. Okay, there's a ball right there. You may want to zoom in your microscope a little closer. closer, and I'm going to try to move this ball into place right over that pad. They don't have to be perfect. Okay, so I've got a few balls in place. And like I said, that'd take me about an hour, and I'd probably start up at the top and work my way down, or you could start in a corner and work your way up. Normally, right now at this stage, I would not tackle a BGA chip this size. And then what you do is, once you've got it on there, I'm going to turn down this fan even lower, because I don't want those solder balls blowing anywhere. So I've got my fan, or my airspeed, turned down as low as it can go, and I'm coming in from fairly high up. I'm touching my let's see, that's actually even too close. Eventually those solder balls melt. Oh, I got two solder balls that melted together. You see that big one? Okay, so that's hot enough to melt the solder, and that's how you do that. Now right here, I had two solder balls joined together, and I would have to fix that. Okay, and the only way that you can do that is practice. This whole area is very hot. So I'm gonna, yeah, that's connected to 4 different pads right there. So I would have to reheat that and use a sucker and pull that off. But I have a few of the solder balls that did stick to their pads, their respective pads. Okay. So that's BGA. Without BGA, we would not have the technology that we have today. It's what makes it possible. So you could have hundreds. There are some chips, guys, that have literally got hundreds of connections underneath. I don't recommend hand reballing. That's why I'm not going to attempt to show you a good job on this video. I would do it on a small chip, like a TriStar chip from an iPhone or an iPad, because there's only like 20 balls on there. But a large one like this, I wouldn't do that on a video. There are some people that do that on a video, and they speed run the video. Okay. But that's the only reason you would do that, is if you determined after looking at the schematic and running tests that chip is good. Alright, and the only way you can determine that chip is good is if you have the schematic. Alright, you guys can tell that my hair is a little bit different today. This is what I like to call my "you owe me money" look. Okay, slick my hair back, straight back. All right, and that's the nice thing about pomade, is you can put your hair into any configuration that you'd like. And yesterday I introduced to you one alternative to actual pomade if you can't get your hands on or make any oil-based pomades. Well, there are some other products that you can use. Today I'm using extra virgin olive oil. Now, that's extra virgin. All right. I don't know exactly why it's extra virgin, or even what virgin olive oil is. I don't think it has anything to, I have no idea. Okay, but you can grab yourself some olive oil, and I would recommend the virgin olive oil, because I think it's got other stuff other than olive oil in it. And this is what people used to use back in the day. In fact, during the Roman Greco times, olive oil was used as currency, and they used it for everything. And they'd put olive oil in their hair. Okay, it does not get rancid as quickly as straight up butter. All right, and then of course margarine isn't going to get as rancid as straight up butter, but it doesn't smell as good. All right, and one of the things you want, half the point of pomade is the pleasing odor. Olive oil, well, you're sitting at your table and you see a head of lettuce and you grab a slice and you can just, rub a little bit of that lettuce into your hair, and now you're eating a piece of lettuce with olive oil on it. So that's another advantage of it. Guys, it's been great. We'll do more things. I hope to have a video out every day or every other day. Come and learn with me. Appreciate having you. Please subscribe. Happy New Year.